Welcome everyone to our ProTech Talk. All of you here in the hotel and those of you online, we're pretty excited about our topic today. We're pretty excited about this great group of panelists. We've got a very challenging topic, and we picked some individuals that are up for it. So we're looking forward to some very interesting discussion. We want all of you to participate, both here and online. They can't enter in the chat, right, Derek? No? Okay. Sorry about that online. But everybody here in the room, please feel free to pose questions to the panelists. And so let me start by introducing our panelists. We were so fortunate to come up with this group of individuals that their schedules are very difficult, and we were able to hornswoggle them into joining us. I'll start with my far right over here. I won't try to tackle his full name. He goes by Ohm. Ohm is a completion engineering advisor at Hess, Bakken completions functional team. He is most known by the people in the industry as Ohm. He's responsible for all development wells in the Hess Bakken asset from planning and design phase of wells and pads until flowback operations, and recently started working on refrac operations. He received his bachelor's degree from Chiang Mai University and a master's degree in petroleum engineering from OU, that's Ohio University.
You know what it is.
Oh, no. Oh. He's been working at Hess for 14 years. His experiences range from production operations, well integrity, and completion engineering. And the basin experiences range from Permian, Gulf of Mexico, West Africa, and Bakken. Ohm, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to have you. I'll jump over to the other end here. The individual to my far left is Mombourquette. Cole graduated from the University of Calgary in 2016 with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. And he just recently obtained his professional engineering designation this past June. A lot of hard work in that, I know. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Following a brief employment period with Murphy Oil, Cole joined the ProTechnics team and has been applying his analytical skills to diagnostic applications in Canadian basins over the last 4 years. And he's actually presenting a paper at this meeting. So again, great to have you with us, Cole.
Thanks, buddy.
Next to my immediate left is Venky. Ramanathan, that close?
Yeah, good enough.
He is a production stimulation engineer and technology manager at Torxen Oil and Gas Limited, which is part of the Palliser joint venture with Schlumberger. He has worked in various technical and managerial roles over the last 25 years in various parts of the world, including Canada, India, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. He has co-authored 15 SPE publications and holds a master's in petroleum engineering and natural gas engineering from West Virginia University and a bachelor's in chemical engineering from Panelists University. That's close. So yeah, great to have you with us.
Thank you, buddy.
And last but not least, my sidekick here for many years and one of my mentors, Daneshy, is president of Daneshy Consultants International and adjunct professor of petroleum engineering at the University of Houston. He has 50 years of experience in the oil and gas industry and has presented more than 50 technical papers. And I don't think that's accurate. I think you've done more than 50. I think this might be a little dated bio. I'd say probably more like 60 technical papers related to hydraulic fracturing. He is an SPE honorary member, and that's the highest level in the SPE, in case you didn't know. He's an SPE distinguished member. Anybody can get that because I'm one of those. And he's received the SPE Distinguished Service Award. So he's a very noted consultant and trainer, teacher, and a great mentor of mine for a number of years. So that's our panel. Again, feel free to participate. If you have questions, if you want to challenge some of these individuals, they love to be challenged. So don't hesitate to jump in there and send some tough questions to them. Our topic is making the most of all that data, specifically diagnostic data set integration and the impact on development decisions. So that's what we're here to tackle. So we're going to do this by a series of starter questions to try to get the discussion started. And we'll jump from individual to individual. If any of you panelists have an interest in addressing this topic, please feel free to do so. Don't feel like you have to address every topic, but wherever you'd like to jump in, please do. So we'll start off with our first question. What does diagnostic data integration infer to you? Diagnostic data integration. What does that infer to you? What comes to mind when you hear that term? Is it integrating diagnostic data into your process workflow? Integrating different types of diagnostic data together? Integration of diagnostic data into different teams or disciplines? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Diagnostic data integration. Go for it.
I'll start. I'll start to answer that. We do diagnostic data just simply to know what we're doing. Most of us, majority of the operations that we perform, we go do the operation with the expectation that something good will come out of it. And through experience, we find what are the kinds of things that work and what are the kinds of things that do not work. But if we want to make sure what we are doing is actually working as best it can and as best it should, then we need diagnostics. We need to collect data, to look at that data, analyze the data, see what's going on, what happened, did it do what we expected, and if not, what could we change in order to make it do what we would like to see happen in order for us to increase and improve the productivity of oil and gas wells. So to me, the question of diagnostics is not an option. It is a necessity. We got to collect the data if we want to know what's happening. That's my 2 bits.
I cannot agree more. I think it was very well put, Ali. And I definitely like to just add and say that if I would have to just sum it up in a different way, I would call it reservoir intelligence, right? And we need this reservoir intelligence to optimize anything, right? And it is our eyes. And today, the way I like to always call tracers is it's one of the very few technologies that actually touch the reservoir and brings back valuable information. So putting that to work for us in any discipline is very, very powerful.
I did not put him up to that answer about tracers, by the way. That's his own choice.
I would like to add another point, which I think is quite critical. Diagnostics has got 2 aspects to it. Number 1, collection of the data, and number 2, analysis and interpretation of the data. We generally delegate the data collection to an outside organization to come and do it for us. They come and collect the data. And where I think we sometimes fall short is in interpretation and understanding of the data. You really don't want to collect the data unless you intend to spend the time and energy needed to find out what actually was happening. And if there is in our industry, I think we have a shortcoming, that is in interpretation of the diagnostic data we have collected. And the reason for that is quite simple. You know, we go and do some sort of an operation in a well, and if the well performed as we were hoping it would, we don't take the time to analyze the data because we think we have got it. Well, in reality, an analysis of the data is likely to show us how could we have done it even better. So if there is a shortcoming within our industry, it's in the analysis of the data, which I think is quite critical. And I put a lot of emphasis on that part.
Yeah, to answer your question directly, I'm just going to tackle question head on. So if you ask me what diagnostic data integration is basically how you put all these integrations of the data together, diagnostic, and try to make sense out of it. Not just try to make sense, you need to make sure that how can you make the most value out of this data? If you make sense of it, what's the value? And then you always want to go back to the beginning. How do you set up not just one discipline that's working on this? in Hess, we call it a multidisciplinary data gathering. So it's different type of data, different teams working together with the same goal. The same goal can either be making more oil, reducing costs. How do we get there? And with the diagnostic data integration, we learn from it, and then we adjust our design and our normal operating rhythm to match that and make value for the operator.
Right. Cole, I know you do data
Yeah, so
integration within, our own area of technology. So how do you apply it?
yeah, so that's kind of one of the key focuses of my role is taking not just the tracer data sets that I work with, but also correlating that to items such as the completion summaries, frac pressures and tonnages per stage, different reservoir parameters, from something simple like the LAS showing the gamma and the gas shows more into mineralogical composition of the rock across a well. So to me, diagnostic data integration first and foremost means, kind of to echo what Ohm said, the integration of multidisciplinary data sets into kind of a holistic perspective. And then secondly, it also means to me the engagement with kind of the entire asset team. I've found through my experience with ProTechnics and their tracer diagnostics that some of the best value is actually obtained during those integrated diagnostic review meetings when you have different multidisciplinary members present in the meeting, having their own specialties to bring to the table and provide unique perspectives that might shed some extra light onto what we're seeing downhole.
Very good. There's a lot of diagnostic technologies out there today. So when somebody comes in with a new snake oil, or excuse me, a new diagnostic technology, how do you go about judging whether or not this looks like it's something worthwhile for you to undertake?
Thanks for that, buddy. So for us at Torxen, essentially the Palliser joint venture, we are, we basically, for those of you who might not be aware of us, we essentially are more of a conventional sand, 1 to 500 millidarcy reservoir, but multiple stacked thin layers where we put very, very small fracs, typically just for size, what we would put in one stage in an unconventional well is what we would put in an entire well for us, right? Compared to, the Bakken or something like that, just for reference. So for us, when people do come in and, start talking about new technologies, the first is obviously cost effectiveness with value, very similar to what Ohm alluded, right? Is this going to bring value within the scale of the operation that we are doing and we are performing, right? So that is the number one, cost benefit ratio, as we would like to call it, is our driver to eventually even see whether this is applicable and is fit for basin in Calgary, right? Because what might be fit for basin in North Sea or Gulf of Mexico, might not be a fit for basin in Canada.
Gotcha. I know you're a big fit for the reservoir.
Yeah.
As I understand it. How about you, Ohm?
I got
Got people knocking on the door all the time, wanting an appointment. You want to share the latest. So how do you handle that?
so usually what we use, we have four letters, right? It's called SQDC, which is safety, delivery, SQDC, safety, quality, delivery, and cost, right? So we have to check, make sure you have good safety record. Can't just show it up like no one knows what's going on. And green hats, like, all that's very important. Quality, what type of quality data that you would get us, right? It's data qualified as a very, very good value added data. Delivery, can you deliver this information on time, right? Or if you promise to deliver one thing, can you get that? And then cost is, we're going to have to benchmark you against the cost of other companies. Are we getting the good value? You don't have to be the cheapest company, but it has to be a good SQDC together. And the second part here is validation, right? You ask about the new company coming in. How can we validate that the data that you are showing is good, and the data that stuff that you are telling me is actually is valid, right? So we usually go through some sort of cycle of trial and checking, make sure the data means something before we actually continuous running that type of diagnostic.
Speaking of value, how can a service provider, not just us, but any service provider, how can they add more value to their technology? You know, what can they do to help make that technology work for you?
So for me is I would look for the word partnership, right? If you want, I see this technology is working well as an engineer, as the, the engineer completions, you want to work together with that company to help shape that information, shape that type of diagnostic, come back and help them out. Like, hey, this data doesn't make sense. Why? And how do we change it? How do we work together to get to that, the point that would create value for both of us?
Probably.
I would add another aspect to this. I very much support what O was saying. He did a very good job of going through the process. One other aspect which is very important is how much the provider of that service or diagnostic know about my business. How well does he understand what I need, and how can he help me apply his technology better in order to get the objectives that I have in mind? And very often, and let's be quite honest about this, very often some of the new service providers, newcomers to the game, know what they're able to do, what they're capable to do, but are not as well familiar with what that is going to give me as the user of that technology. And that process can very easily be accommodated and satisfied by what O said, and that is partnership. Sit down and talk with them, let them know what we want, let them tell us how they can help us get what we want. That collaboration and cooperation is very necessary. And I think that is necessary for both sides, not only for the service provider, but also for the service user. As an operator, let's keep in mind, we don't get the value out of the services that he provides. We get the value from the added production and the added benefits that we get, added returns that we get from the use of that technology. So the more effective we use that technology, the better off we are. And keeping that in mind, then we need to share with the service provider as much as we can in order to help them tell us how we can best use their technology.
Right. Oh, you work with a lot of operators in Canada. And I'm sure you've seen they have different methodologies for integrating technologies. Have there been some in particular that you thought did an especially effective job of integrating technologies, not just what you're offering, but what others offer, that kind of stood out in your mind when you were working with them?
Yeah, so not every project we run, but coming from the service side, this is something that I consider important, not just to know about your own technology, but how that might compare and complement other diagnostics. So semi-regularly we'll be on a project where they've run both our tracer diagnostics in addition to other items such as microseismic data or fiber. And while it's important that we know we have consistent, reliable results from our side, it's also equally important to understand the consistency and reliability of what we might be seeing from additional diagnostics. On that note, correlation is not always equal to causation, but when you have multiple indicators suggesting the same thing, it tends to increase the reliability of the results that you're seeing.
Okay, Venky, you got all this diagnostic data, some new data, just hot off the press. The data does not compare favorably with your preconceived notion about how things are working out there. So you got some conflicting data here. Maybe it conflicts with the production data. So how do you come to grips with some new data, doesn't fit the model? How do you bring those concepts together constructively?
Yeah. So it's obviously a loaded question, right? So, and it's not a straight answer. So let's start with a simple example. For example, for us, when we track, we run oil soluble and water traces, and there are areas where are high water cut wells, which are prone. So everybody comes up with a brilliant idea. We're going to run the water soluble trace. We're going to run the water tracer. We're going to find out where the water is coming from. And we have our completion, which is basically a sliding sleeve. We can go in there and close the sleeve and shut the water off. And, amen, we produce all the oil only.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, right? So we run the water tracer, but, right, wrong, or indifferent, many times we essentially find in our particular case that the water is actually good water. It's the water that's actually bringing the oil along with the oil. So we, the idea that we have in our head sometimes versus what Mother Nature tells you is something that you have to respect. Just because you have this idea, you try it a couple of times to just verify and validate, that. And if you're actually seeing, the benefit of shutting off the water, or, you're shutting off the oil tube, you have the ability to go and change course. So that's kind of the stuff that we actually, talk and deal with. And then another data set that, especially as time proceeds, all right, the longevity of the data after a few months, when the tracer concentrations start going lower, right? And when we don't see contributions across the entire lateral, from a flow assurance standpoint, does this well need a clean out? This is marginal. You are kind of in a no man's land, right? Those are areas where, we would love to see improvements and, confidence, be generated at a higher level, right? So those are some of the kind of things that we actually look at, and we make a judgment call based on, a lot of other factors like, it's not only that particular piece of data. You're looking at, the production information. You're looking at, the pump charts. You're looking at, the reservoir, and, making a call whether, just the decline trends, how it's declining, whether it's kind of, just a kind of a regular flat decline, or whether it's kind of step declines that we can sometimes notice. We take all that into account, to make the best of the data that we have, right? Integrate every piece of information before we make a call. That's what we do.
So you don't throw out data just because it doesn't fit, right?
Yeah, exactly. You've got to respect. I think the biggest challenge that we have, many of us, I quote my professor in college who I even met yesterday, right? And I still remember one of his very first statements. He said to me that you're going to go to the oil field, and it's not the data that you don't know that's going to hurt you. It's the data that you know that is wrong that's going to hurt you more. So having an open mind and respecting what the data tells us, can actually give us a lot of information.
Okay, Ohm, you've tried a lot of different technologies in the Bakken, I know. So what do you do when all of a sudden this new technology that's highly advertised and marketed, all of a sudden you tried it and it doesn't fit your model? How do you go about handling that?
Well, what model, like economic model or reservoir model, or what is it?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I just want to, elaborate. Okay.
Either or.
Okay, so if the data doesn't match, so goes back to what I mentioned earlier, right? Validations, you have to validate. Now, the validation said, hey, this doesn't make sense, or this is probably not right. So a couple ways you can do it, right? So you can say you can work together to improve the database, or you can work together to improve the diagnostic, or at that point you just say, hey, there's no future for this data set. It just gives you a wrong information. So as a team, we have to understand what direction do we want to go, right? At the end of the day, if we agree that this is probably not the right approach we want to do, there's probably no value for that diagnostic results.
All right. How about in the audience? Surely some of you out there have looked at different technologies, and they conflict with each other. They conflict with production. How have you handled those situations? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Fundamentals. What's the basis of the sampling program, the data collection that it's based on? Quite often you'll find there's a fundamentals violation in the data selection, data quality, data analysis. That once you fix the fundamentals, you either find out the data was wrong, or you solve the problem. Now the data gets to one. Understanding the principles.
Great point, Phil. Thank you.
Want to add
Anyone else?
add one more thing.
Go ahead.
So basically, another thing is we can, as an engineer, we want to look at a bunch of data sets. We want to look at different results, 25 diagnostic data, whatever. But for me, whatever information that shows the link to making more oil, that's probably the one we want to focus more. We can look at cluster efficiency all day long, but at the end of the day, it doesn't link to production. So why are we looking at it, right? Because it doesn't make any more value. So I want to go back to that again. So that's my point.
Good point. Okay, I want to ask each one of you. Share a surprise moment from diagnostics that you received in the past, sort of an uh-oh. I didn't see that coming. Okay. Who wants to go first? You want to do it?
I'll go first.
Uh-oh.
As most of you may know, I'm very involved in the diagnostics and data collection and trying to understand what goes on during a fracturing treatment and learn as much as I can about it. A couple of years ago, and I go through this horizontal wall fracturing, how these fractures interact with each other and how they grow and so on. And I've found a bunch of things that I felt are revolutionary. These are things we didn't understand and so on. And about a couple of years ago, I ran into a gentleman who told me that he recovered a tracer that was injected in a well that was 5,000 feet away from where the tracer was coming out of. I want you to understand what he's telling me. He's telling me that there was a tracer which was injected in one well, and 5,000 feet away, that injector was produced from the produced fluid from the other well. And when he told me that, I started to quiz him. I mean, 5,000 feet. This is not a question of fracture going 5,000 feet. This is a question of a conductive fracture, 5,000 feet long, and having conductivity sufficient that the tracer, instead of coming out of the well it was injected in, which is the easiest path, is coming from another well 5,000 feet away. So that runs contrary to all my engineering education understanding. And so I started to quiz him. I said, this, and so, and to make a long story short, after quite a bit of conversation, he convinced me that the tracer that he was producing from his well 5,000 feet away was actually injected in another well. And when you consider the requirements for that kind of a thing to happen, you can see that that's not the picture any of us have got in our mind about how a hydraulic fracture propagates. Since then, every time I hear something about fracturing, instead of making up my mind immediately, is it right or wrong? I start thinking, let's understand what's going on. And that's my suggestion. If you see something that is surprising to you, first order of business is try to understand what's going on. That's my.
Okay, how about your uh-oh moment?
Me? Oh, I got lots of them. I lost
Yeah.
$20 on a bet on a uniformity index last week. So, there's so many of them. But the latest one is the biggest one for me is that from the data that my colleague and friends Mike McKimmey and Craig Sapola showed on the observation lateral project. What they found was there was minimal stress shadowing effect in these in the Bakken, because we reduce our clusters spacing from 35 to about 15. We saw minimal effect, and I was just shocked. I was like, wow, really? That's different from other papers, other technical experts would say. So that's what we saw, but I guess I can say it because it's in the paper. And also it's we use permanent fiber in almost all the wells. So that's how we were so sure that we saw minimal stress shadowing in these wells. So that's the biggest one for me.
Uh-oh moment.
Yeah. So I'll actually continue on the line of thought of Ali on, fracture-driven interactions, right? Sometimes, we see and, get some crazy numbers or crazy reports, especially when we're on a multi-well pad. And especially for us, we don't see fracture-driven interactions at all, because our jobs, like I earlier alluded, are just 10-ton jobs, so the possibility of a fracture being, hundreds of feet is extremely low. So sometimes when you have to also look at, very similar to, going back to the fundamentals and looking at the operation, in terms of on surface, in terms of completions, if you had a screen out, if you reversed out sand, if it went into the same tank, and then, you collected sample and you sent it and you get this crazy first set of numbers that is like, oh my God, this is just not possible. And then you actually go back and say, oh, go back to the operations, go back to seeing, what actually happened. And the story comes out. And then, you just basically discard this data and say, okay, this is bad data, and then we get, look at stuff like that. So, tying the piece, with operations is also essential, is something is important, that we realized at that time.
Yeah, actually, let me add something to he said, because that's very important. The reason I was convinced that the tracer was coming out of this well was because there were no other wells around that producing well. There were no other wells anywhere close to it. The closest well to it was this well, which was 5,000 feet away. And the tracer that they had recovered was injected in this well. And there were no other wells around it. So I didn't have any other option but to accept that as being a fact, as hard-headed as I might be. Thank you.
I never noticed you'd be hard. So, how about it? You have a whole moment with your data?
Yeah, from time to time, we'll see some uh-ohs. I guess to kind of echo Venky and Phil, it goes back to having the fundamentals. So you're only as good as the data that you're capturing. And part of that is collecting notes during the operation as well. So from time to time, we'll see either a tracer signature that's not showing up when it was pumped in like the heel stage of a well and we're seeing up to the toe, or we'll be detecting a tracer that wasn't supposed to be injected. In those cases, it's really reliable to go back to our eStim notes and QC swabs to validate what was injected. Often in those cases, we just had a switched up lot number and a different signature was pumped. From time to time, we'll also see, related to how samples are being collected, a lot of operators in Canada will use group separators to produce their wells. And when it comes to interpreting the fracture-driven interactions, sometimes having commingled flow through a group sample point like that can cause a little bit of anomalous data. So again, kind of going back to how the operations were performed and keeping in close contact with those operators that we're performing the projects with really helps to true up that data.
Great. Dick, I know you had some uh-oh moments. Lay an uh-oh moment on us here.
I think the biggest one, and I think it's something that the industry as a whole is still living with today, was the advent of slick water fracking. Anyone in Nali, you were here, and there's a few of us that were at SPEs, and a lot of work being done on hydraulic fracking, and an immense amount of reservoir modeling, et cetera, that said the only way you can create these fracks is this. And it was sheer luck, and it really wasn't, it was driven by cost. And thank goodness we had someone like Mike Meyerhofer, who's been on previous panels. But he had to spend a year trying to figure out why we were able to make as much production out of a well that we put hardly any profit in. And today, a lot of the unconventional, that's the reason why they're successful, because we have slick water fracking. So that's probably the biggest one of mine.
That was kind of an operational screw up, wasn't it? We couldn't get the profit.
Yeah,
It wasn't.
Not really.
Come on
a
now.
little bit. Yeah.
Didn't say it was your fault.
It was, yeah, it was accident.
Okay.
Interesting.
So then came we don't need no stinking profit paper. Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Stuff that- okay.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience?
I just want to add a point here. This is very, imagine seriously, imagine how many fracturing treatments we did, how much time and energy and money we spent to try to engineer and understand the use of proppants in hydraulic fracturing. Think about the cost of that. Think about the energy that went into it and thought into it that it went into it. And at the end of it, we find out that those discussions were not as useful as we thought they were.
What about the discussion on this conductivity, right? We went to school, we learned that we want to get 40/70, 20/40. 10 years ago, for 20/40, you can't get anything on the market. Nowadays, people just try to pump 100 mesh, which we had to call it out for scouring frag 10 years ago. Stuff like that is just changing. Maybe we don't need a lot of conductivity anymore. We just need good enough conductivity because these wells are so long anyway. That's another thing to think about.
200 mesh.
I may have.
So, it's a funny story, to just add on to this proppant. So those of you who might not be again familiar, right? Proppant sizes, the most common size in the old days was 20/40.
Yeah.
20/40 proppant. For those of you who probably still know that, right? With cross-linked fluid, it was 20/40 proppant. And after 20/40, we went, like Ali was alluding, higher conductivity, we want 12/20 or 16/30.
Yeah.
So we went 12/20, we took out that mesh, we did 16/30. And then, with the advent of slick water, because it was not viscous enough, water was not viscous enough, we had to put, light proppant, we had to move, to 40/70 proppant. And then, some smart service company guys essentially came up with proppant called 1000. Essentially everything that was mined in between. And, we started pumping that, and, that was much cheaper. Because, and then, we went into 100 mesh and all kinds of stuff now, non-API sands. So it's unbelievable sometimes, how our opinions get concretized, with what we know, what we learned, and then, how they are shattered by actual practices where economics dictates, practices and, pushes the technical realm to accept it, right? Another example of that is I would talk about, in fracturing, in the old days, if, coming, from the Schlumberger side of experience, right? If we overflushed a well by 1 barrel, we would actually be called on the carpet to actually come and, say why, what happened, and actually, re-perform the treatment. That was how. And today, with the advent of horizontal multi-stage fracturing, overflushing is a bygone concept, right? So it's
evil.
necessary evil because operations is king.
Yeah.
Well, look at the list of additives, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, from 15 up to. 34.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
Just the list of additives in your fluid
Yeah.
too, right? It was a big list in the past. Now you're down to 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
Think about how much money we spent on that. We're not talking about millions or billions.
Yeah.
Huge amounts of money were spent on that. And think about how convinced we were that we knew what we were doing.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Well, I go back and
Then
you
you
do too, I know.
diagnostics. Sorry,
Go ahead.
you have diagnostics, elegant, but that's the very point. We've got to break that paradigm. Stop being convinced of what we know. To always thought a little more data driven,
Yeah,
a little more open minded.
exactly.
And with that, we're gonna get somewhere. Otherwise, we're just gonna repeat the same mistakes.
Absolutely.
We need to be ready to accept that we may have been wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm being nice to myself.
I'll say, like we say, I think we don't know is a great possibility. All right. And I think we need to basically, embrace that, right? It's like I said, we may be wrong, we don't know is something, there's just too many factors out there that we still don't know. And I think we need to acknowledge that and, give everybody, like you're saying, chances for them to present that to us.
And the tool that allows us to do that is diagnostics.
Yeah.
With all these variables that are changing between different operators, different basins, reservoirs, are you guys doing anything now to technology share between basins, operators to normalize some of the data that's coming in? And then how do you stay ahead of that as well to prepare for the change?
Hey, you're nodding your head.
Oh, okay. I thought someone was gonna go first. So yes, so we, last one we did was in 2019. We have a bunch of people come from different companies to the tower, and we just do a operators only knowledge sharing. So we just open the book and say, hey, this is what we learned, what's the best practice, and that hasn't been done since COVID. So other than internal operators only type of just discussion. ERTech, HFTC, those are the ones that depends on the discretion of the management, whatever they can share, we just learn from there. But totally agree, we need to do more from type of joint discussion from different companies and working together as an industry, not just siloing one company and just keep everything to the chest.
I'll go next on that one. So just from the ProTechnics side, it's not so much something that we've made public, but one of our engineers has been working on creating kind of an internal database to sort and filter all of the various projects that we've done over the past years with tracer diagnostics. And that's been a tool that we're developing for our engineers to use internally to kind of enhance the value that we're delivering to our clients. We don't necessarily share data between operators, but we can provide that perspective to them.
Great. Anybody else got any suggestions as to how to get past our preconceived notions? If you were a young, okay, Bill.
Start with this paradigm. The
Okay.
only thing I know for sure is I'm wrong.
Good place to start.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Data analytics is driving a lot of our decisions. The problem is that data analytics is done with stuff that we've already done in the past. It's
Right.
not trying anything new, which means that we're just optimizing what we've done in the past, which is the same old, same. There's no new thinking out there. And that's one of the problems which keeps us stuck where we are, I think, is that you have to start thinking more, go back to the basics, go back to the physics of what's driving. One thing about working at Total many years ago was that when I proposed a solution, I've always would say, okay, show me on the board, meaning show me the equation of that, why that works. So it is important for us as engineers to go back to the basics of flow, how it's working, what's driving. These are things that were developed by people very, very smart many, many years ago. And it is a pain to think that hard. But I think that's where the future solution comes in. We have to come up with solutions that are based on the equations or the flow parameters instead of what we've done in the past. I mean, I've got a lot of answers from data analytics, but it's not giving me anything new to try. And when I want to try something new, I'm told, well, no, our data analytics says such and such, and we need to knock that on its head and say no, and we need to hold our ground. Data analytics is good to a certain extent.
Yesterday, I spent all day judging one of the judges in the Petro Bowl, and there was question after question after question on data analytics. And it was pretty obvious that, the young engineers are becoming very fluent in data analytics, and the older engineers got some catching up to do. Me being one.
Yeah.
So, data analytics has a lot of value, and we might as well accept the fact that we better get on that wagon train. We're gonna get left behind. We clap your hands about it.
Yeah, well, analytics, we've all heard the correlation. Surroundings and ice cream cones, pretty close to one another. If we rely totally on analytics without the applied science of engineering, without the applied science of expertise, we're gonna go down rabbit holes we've never heard of before, and it's gonna be a gong show.
Mhm.
We have to let the data drive us to engineered decisions, to engineered solutions, applying the fundamentals of flow. Otherwise, we're just gonna run into the window. We're good.
You mean we gotta go back and read these papers that actually had equations in them?
We just look at diagnostics.
You see that? Well,
I don't know, paper that's got more than half a dozen equations. Wait, put that one aside. Yes.
I do think these are some great points, because I think one of the problems is that our optimization without looking at data analytics is really driven by what's my next door neighbor doing? Oh, he's making better wells, therefore I'm gonna do what they're doing. And the reality is, they might have better rock. And I think in a lot of areas, we've played that game, but there have been companies that have been willing to kind of step out of the box. You've got to push the envelope to know where the boundaries are. And I think profit loading is a perfect example of that. You know, the last 5 years, it's continued to ramp up, and we get 2,000 pounds per lateral foot, and everybody's, oh my gosh, this is God, we've got to be with that. And then someone pumps 2,500, and then someone pumps 3,000. And you've got to stretch it to know that you've gotten to that point.
And geomechanics are playing a big role. You know, that's something that we didn't pay much attention to in the past. Anything else from the audience? We've got kind of one closing question that we like to offer at these ProTech talks that I want to pose to the panelists. Not that I see anybody in here that might necessarily qualify for this question, but what is the most important advice you could give to a petroleum engineering graduate just entering our industry?
I'll take it back at it.
All right, go for it.
So I'll essentially say today, most of the folks, you know, at least the young engineers that I see who have joined, right, are very concerned, first and foremost, whether they can make a 20, 30-year career in the oil and gas industry with all the talk that is actually happening, right? And many people are worried, and rightfully so. So do I want to enter an industry that is on its last legs is a big question. And obviously, the only thing that I would essentially like to tell them is for most of us, you know, this is, again, to quote even, you know, the Schlumberger CEO, right? He said, this is the biggest transition in mankind that has ever attempted on the planet to move from oil and gas to, you know, the next energy revolution that is going to power us. And there are many of us in this room that, you know, probably may not be here to see that, but it is the younger generation, like the Coles and a lot of other folks, you know, who are, you know, like Buddy, he's nudging me out here. Who's probably, you know, who's going to do that. So we need that young talent. We need, you know, it's you folks who are going to do that. And it is absolutely imperative that, you know, that the number of takeaways from this industry into the next revolution, whether it is lithium, whether it is, you know, geothermal, the amount of oil and gas, it's going to be the energy industry, right? It's, you do not have to look at it as just petroleum or gas, but, you know, it's the energy. And, you know, a lot of the skills are transferable, and energy is a basic human need. And, you know, so you've got to always, you know, be there to support and push that.
Diversify your education.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you two? What advice would you give?
I deal with students quite a bit. And one of the points that early in the process I conveyed to them is that where do you want to be 20, 30 years from now? Do you want to be just a body in the crowd? Or do you want to be known? Yeah. Or do you want to be known?
That's a compliment.
Not a body. That's a compliment. Right? Body, not body. Oh, like body. Body, not body. But the other side of it is okay too. No, really, do you want to be a person in the crowd? Or do you want to be known for something that you have done that separates and distinguishes you from your colleagues and the others? And if you want to be in the second category, then you need to put the hard work it takes to get there. And I tell them, look around you, of the people that you see, which one of them, of the older people you see around you, which one of them would you like to be like? Like the ones that are lost in the crowd, or somebody who's standing out? And if you want to be standing out, decide what it is that you're going to do, and decide that you're going to spend the energy and the effort that is needed to get there, because it's not going to be handed to you.
All right.
Okay, so
How about it?
on my side, one thing that comes to mind is innovation, right? So when you're graduating from college, probably don't know much about it. first I would, if you can, you can start working in the field, start moving back to the office, learning all the basic, and then start looking what is the next things to oil and gas industry. Most likely, any new thing that you can come up with, data analytics, or you heard the term of data is a new oil, but it's within the boundary, right? But you need to use some sort of physics model and diagnostic to validate that data. But go back to the innovation. So once you come back to the office, you would think about what else can you do to innovate this industry, and then use the new idea to transform this industry to we might not need to drill, for example, you might not need to drill so many wells anymore. You only need to drill 1 or 2 wells in one DSU and making more oil, something like that, right? So for me, it's like thinking about what can innovate this industry, and then working with it. You can start a new company making more money that way too. So that's it.
When we've asked that question in the past, one executive for one of the independent oil companies, he says, one of the things I wish my people were better at, my new hires and the recent graduates, I wish they had more business acumen.
Mhm.
They don't really have a clue about how we profit around here, how to read a P&L, a profit loss
P&L.
statement, And so that's probably something that all of us probably could do better, to learn a little bit more about the business side of things. So, Cole, how about it?
My advice for new grads would just to be keep learning. It's really important to know what you know, but it's more important to know what you don't know. So one of the things that I try to do is just keep my eye on new trends that are developing, new technologies, not necessarily inside of the oil and gas industry, but could be related to like IT, and bringing that in. How does that fit with our industry, and how can we improve upon it? So yeah, if you start getting complacent and comfortable with your level of knowledge, that's when you should start being worried.
Hey, buddy.
Yes, sir.
I'll comment similar to what Ohm said. I think one of the things that has changed from 30 years ago, we had companies like Amoco and Exxon and Schlumberger who were really training ground for our engineers. And there isn't as much of that. Most companies don't have much of a training program. So as Ohm said, any opportunity you can do to get involved in different aspects of our business. That field training is essential early on. But even with that, if you get a stint, and there still are some operators today will have a rotation where they're in drilling and completion. That will make you a so much better engineer 20 years from now, being more well-rounded, because we have a tendency to think in silos, and anything you can do when you pull an experience from out of that helps a bunch.
And to add to what he's just saying, I'll say the more we digitize the oil field, I think the younger generation will have a chance of sticking to it, sticking to it, because they love the digital too. They're born with the iPhones. So I would think that this digital revolution will hopefully facilitate their stay and interest in the oil and gas, and they think of it as a technology industry, and hopefully jump more onto it.
Guys, I'll add one more thing. The number one thing I find is a challenge right now, for me personally, and for all of us as we've grown, communication. The techniques and styles of both active listening and active talking, taking on new assignments, are the things that I try and get the new folks to really do. I ask you to do something, listen. I will listen to you. Stay in the moment. Stay off the goddamn iPhone. Whatever. And just, the more we can teach folks active communication, that's going to be what's going to get us into the next stage. And recognize that the fellow that stands at the end of the pipe, pretty below, actually makes the oil and gas.
Yeah.
Not you.
Absolutely.
You're there to help.
Well said.
Park that ego at the door. Phone the guy up at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, how's your day?
Mhm.
And when he says not very well, then you listen to him, because that's where you're learning stuff.
Very good point.
Well said.
Agreed.
Very well said.
I think it often helps to have a mentor that you can run ideas past.
Yeah.
Phil Stemmer, Ollie Daneshy. on him.
Just something to add on that too, not advice for new people, but advice for the oil, and gas, energy as a whole is to do a little bit better job of marketing what we're doing, right? You guys have all this data and we're able to show ourselves that in the opening ceremony yesterday, cut emissions by 50% while doubling our production. The world doesn't know that, right? So sharing the success stories of what we're doing would provide a little bit more need for these guys, this new generation to want to come.
And give ourselves credit for what we're doing. I mean, we're a very important industry, Everybody wants to have windmills in their backyard, but let's face it. You gotta have oil to build plastics, to make windmills, So we need to give ourselves more credit for the things that we are contributing, not just being held accountable that, we created a cloud of some sort over an isolated well in West Texas somewhere.
I think there's a lot of value in what you just said, and that is, we are a very inward business. We talk to each other and we chat with each other and we agree and disagree with each other. The point is to get the message outside of our own community. And first of all, we got nothing to apologize for. We are producing the oil and gas and the energy that is keeping this civilization moving forward, not only in this country, but all over the world. Yeah. The point we also want to make is that, look, we live in this society just like everybody else. We are as concerned about the environment as everybody else. We are as concerned about the health and well-being of our fellow citizens as everybody else. And so our point is that, look, let's all of us work together to improve the quality of life while we also provide the energy which is needed in order to move forward and to improve that quality. We are part of a broader community, not an oil and gas industry, just talking to each other. And I think that's quite important. That was a very pertinent point you raised.
Great.
Thank you.
Yes, Bob.
Sometimes we overlook the fact that talking to a lot of college kids coming out, there's a lot of boys out there about different things, the energy and the life. The electricity doesn't just come from a plug in the wall.
Yeah.
8 out of 10 kids coming out of college, you might get an answer that's not right. So it's like very generating stuff, do the testing, basic stuff like that.
It's gotta be hydropower, sure.
It's magic. I don't know about you guys, but I don't know whether you have noticed that there are communities that are complaining now about having too many solar panels. They're talking communities which are complaining about too many windmills. And it is not, once those industries extend to the point where they're substantially supplying the energy needs, they will have similar complaints and constraints as we are facing. And so, but they are needed, they are necessary, they are needed, and they need to continue to do what they're doing and just try to make what they are doing more friendly and less troublesome for the communities. And that's just as we need to do that, so that's the other sources of energy.
Okay, we've got papers. I'm sure we're all anxious to sit in on. So thanks very much for your participation. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for the ideas that have been exchanged. Thank you, panelists, for spending the time with us. I know your time is valuable. I know you need to be out there evaluating new diagnostic technologies. So thanks for spending this time with us and giving us some hints just how we can get our foot in the door.
Yes, sir.
Some of you folks. So thanks, everyone. This ProTech Talk is going to be recorded. Yes, Phil.
And thanks
Buddy.
ProTechnics and Buddy for making this possible.
Yeah.
Had it not
Thank
been
you, Buddy.
When you want to be a buddy.
I'm not going to hear the end of that. Thanks. All right. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks. See you again. Thank you, man.